So, if you're into blacksmithing, and if you're anything like me, you're probably a bit of an anvil nerd, which means that you like to look at pictures of anvils, you like to read books about anvils, you like to watch videos about anvils. And so, I thought I'd just make a quick video about my anvils. I live in Cambodia, and so finding an anvil here is not exactly the easiest thing to do. It's not like you can go on eBay or Amazon and order one and then have it shipped, unless you're willing to pay $2,000 for shipping. So I had to do a bit of hunting in order to find an anvil. Cambodia was under French control from about the 1860s until the 1950s. And so I knew that during those years, it was almost certain that anvils were being shipped over to Cambodia to be put to work here. And so I knew that there would definitely be some of these old anvils kicking around somewhere, and I just had to find them. And so what I did is I just took a picture off the internet of an anvil, and I showed my father-in-law, and my father-in-law is Cambodian. He grew up, lived all his life in Cambodia, and I asked him, have you ever seen one of these in your lifetime anywhere? And he said yes. He goes, I lived in a village about 25, 30 years ago, and there was a man who was a blacksmith using one of these anvils. And so I said, okay, if you go back to that village, maybe you can find it for me, and maybe that guy's willing to sell it if he still has it. And it's worth a try. Let's give it a try. And that's exactly what he did. So my father-in-law, he went out to that village, found that old blacksmith, and he was still there, and he still had an anvil, and that's this anvil right here. And we talked over the phone, and my father-in-law, he doesn't know how to use smartphones or anything like that, so I wasn't able to see a picture of it or anything. I just had to trust him that it was a good anvil, and he told me how much the old man wanted. And I agreed to it, and I wired him the money, and he went ahead and bought it for me. And it turned out the old man, he was the old blacksmith, he was too old to work anymore. He wasn't making any money, and he was sick, and he needed money to pay for his medical bills. And so I thought, okay, I'll pay what he asks, and if the anvil turns out to be some piece of junk, well, I won't get angry. I'll just consider it to be an act of charity, and he can use that money to pay his medical bills, and it's not a big deal. And so I just went ahead with it. So my father-in-law brought the anvil back home, and when I first got it, the thing was covered in rust. But I knew right away as soon as I saw it that, okay, this is a good anvil. This is a European anvil. Looks to be pretty old. So I'm pretty happy with it. And I wasn't sure what I had, so I cleaned off all the rust. Gave it a good wire brushing, and I found this maker's mark on the side, and it's pretty worn away, and I wasn't sure what I was seeing, but you can see the PFP there. And so I Googled that, PFP anvil, and of course PFP is the initials for Paul Ferdinand Petdinghaus. And this actually says original PFP. And so then I realized, hey, I got a Petdinghaus here, that's pretty good. And for the price I paid, I got a good deal for it. And it's 110 pounds or 50 kilograms, and I was really happy that I was able to find this one. Now, it's not in perfect condition. It's got some sway to it. Maybe at its deepest point, it sways down about 1/8 of an inch or so. And it's got some chunks out of the corners here, but all in all, it's a really good anvil. So I asked my father-in-law to ask the old blacksmith, where did he get this anvil? And he said that in 1979, he found it in a ditch, right, laying in a ditch on the side of the road. And I wondered, why would somebody throw an anvil in the ditch? But of course, 1979, well, actually the entire 1970s in Cambodia was extremely violent. A lot of war going on. There was the Vietnam War going on, and a lot of that violence spilled over into Cambodia. But then, of course, in 1975, the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia, and that was a communist party, and extremely violent. They took over the country. It's estimated that 3 million people died after they took over from starvation and just being murdered. And the Khmer Rouge were running the show for about 3.5 years. And then in 1979, Vietnam invaded Cambodia. And so I'm guessing that whoever owned this anvil before the man I bought it from, perhaps he was fleeing from the violence and took the anvil with him when they first started to run and realized this thing's too heavy to take with us. Maybe he tossed it in the dish, hoping to come back for it later. Who knows? But anyways, the guy I bought it from is the one who found it, took it home, and he smithed on it for 40 years or so, up until 2018, which is when I bought it from him. So this anvil with the original PFP stamp on it, that tells us that it was made sometime before World War II, perhaps the early 1930s, maybe the late 1920s. So it's about 80 to 90 years old. And how did it get to Cambodia in the first place? Well, nobody knows that, of course. But being a smaller anvil, I'm guessing that it was probably an individual who brought it over, somebody who was going to be spending some time in Cambodia and figured he would have to make his own tools, and he knew he wouldn't be able to just buy it in Cambodia. So he loads up the anvil along with the rest of his luggage on the boat, and now he's got it for himself. If you ever watch G.S. Tong's YouTube channel, you'll see that he also has a smaller Petdinghaus in his shop, and he tells the story about how that anvil was brought to Taiwan, I think by a Catholic missionary or something from Germany. So I wouldn't be surprised if this anvil has a similar story, perhaps a Catholic missionary from Germany, or maybe a businessman brought it over just for his own personal use, and then over time it just ended up in the hands of the local Cambodian smiths. So like I said, I bought this in 2018, and I've only been blacksmithing for about 2 years. And for those first 2 years or so, I did all my work on this anvil, and I taught myself everything that I know so far on this anvil. And 2 years isn't a long time, and so I still have tons and tons to learn about blacksmithing. And late last year, December 2019, I was thinking, I think I want to upgrade a little bit. If I'm going to get better at this craft, I want to have something bigger, a bigger surface to walk on or work on, and I want something that's perfectly flat on top, because even though the sway isn't a big deal, you can work just fine on an anvil like this. I wanted something nice and flat, easier to work on, and so I upgraded up to this anvil here. So I asked my father-in-law if he could once again go on another anvil hunt for me. And he had made some contacts when he was searching for the first anvil. And so he was able to communicate with those guys, and he was able to locate this one for me. And again, owned by a Cambodian smith who was older, no longer able to work, and wanted to sell his anvil and just make a little bit of money off of it. So this time I was able to see photos before I paid the money, and from what I saw in the photos, I was happy with what I saw. And it is a larger anvil. This one's 150 kilograms, or that's about 330 pounds. And I could tell from the photos that, you know, we had a nice, perfectly flat surface on it. And so I knew that, yeah, this is a good looking anvil, and I agreed to purchase it. I went down there and I picked it up. So this anvil here is a French made anvil. It's cast steel, whereas the Petdinghaus is forged tool steel. This anvil is cast steel. So very high quality steel, just cast, not forged. And you can tell it's the French with the side exit hardy hole, although the body and the shape of the anvil is very typical for a Belgian anvil. So I wasn't sure at first if this was French or Belgian, but I did some research online, and I was able to determine that it was actually made in northern France somewhere around 80, 90 years ago. Now the maker's mark is so worn away you can't actually read it anymore, but on the top there it says 150K, that's the weight, 150 kilograms, and in the middle you see a circular logo, but the letters that were written in there are completely obliterated. And on the bottom here, well, I'm assuming that was just some number, maybe a part number, who knows. But doing some research, I discovered that the anvil maker that used this circular logo from northern France was a company. The initials were UAF, which is French for Factories and Steelworks of Fagny, which was a steel company up in northern France, which eventually merged with another French company called Sambre and Mousse. I don't know if I'm saying those words right, but Sambre and Mousse, they made anvils after 1940 as well. So this company was on its own before that, and they made all sorts of steel products, vices and anvils and who knows else what, but some point this anvil was made sometime before 1940 and was shipped over to Cambodia. Now with this anvil being on the heavier side, 330 pounds, I highly doubt that it was brought over by an individual. It was most likely brought over by a French company or perhaps the French government and was put to work in a factory. And who knows when or why or where, but it ended up in the hands of local Cambodian smiths. And the guy I brought it from, he's only had it for 20 years, and he has no idea where the guy he bought it from got it. So I don't know a whole lot about the history of this one, but it's a really, really nice anvil to use. It's got about a 6.5 inch wide face on it. And what I really like about this anvil is the thick body. So unlike other anvils with the thin waist, this anvil, the waist is just as wide as the working face area. So wherever you're hammering on the face, it's supported. And so it's a real beefy, thick anvil. Also, the horn is really thick, and you can see that it just merges in with the entire, almost the entire height of the anvil, both the round horn and the square horn. So that means I can do fairly heavy forging even on the horn, which is really nice for drawing out material. You can draw it out a lot faster on the horn. And with this anvil, I don't have to worry about it not being supported enough to do that kind of forging on it. So really nice anvil to use. Also with this anvil, I got it mounted down real nice and secure to these timbers. I've got silicone all underneath the anvil, and then I put these bars across. These are 1/2 inch thick bars bolted down to these plates here, which are bolted into the timbers. And then the timbers themselves are actually going down into the ground about 2 feet, and they're sitting on top of about a 6 inch thick concrete slab, and then the whole thing is encased in concrete. And with, you know, I got some rebar down there. Everything's secured really well. So the whole thing together, with the concrete, the stand, and the anvil, you're looking at about 700 pounds. And this thing does not move at all. So it's really nice to work with. So that's it. That's my anvil video. Like I said, you're probably only watching this if you're an anvil nerd. So I hope you enjoyed it. And happy forging. And feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you got in your shop. Thanks.